There's quite a few trees and shrubs that you can plant in the fall time. A lot of the really good ones are the ones that are a little bit more drought tolerant. Lilacs are excellent. We have spirea and potentilla, they're always available. Some of the evergreens like cedars, it's not such a good idea. So spruce are fine, junipers are fine, and just about any tree, shade tree, fruit shrub, no problem either. So they're rooting in, but they don't need to have a whole huge amount of root system in the fall. They still root even though you don't see much top growth, so there's a fair amount that you can plant. And the nice thing is the heat isn't so heavy for them to get established in the fall time. You get cooler nights, and yeah, it seems to work out very well. Some of the plants that need a little bit of extra care in the fall time, when you have well-established trees and shrubs, you want to start easing off on the watering. We get hot and all through the summer, and we have all these wonderful rains, but then in the fall time we need to cut back because you want those trees and shrubs to start thinking about winter. So you ease off on the watering, and definitely no fertilizing. You don't do any fall fertilizing on plants that are leafing out or are giving you a fair amount of growth anyways. So you just want them to start setting their leaf bud, it's called, and then in the springtime that's ready to go. So we do ease off on the watering. Some things you just don't water at all in September, but everything we water in good before winters. A lot of times we don't get a good fall rain. Like in October it'll get cold, the soil will be dry, but it won't be really, really moist. So we have to do that walking around, laying the hose down in front of each tree, shrub, perennial, and soak the ground good. And it's a really good thing, a plan to start maybe mid-October, but definitely have it done by the end of October. Sometimes, a lot of times, if we're talking about plants and what people do and things that they're going to do wrong, sometimes it is overwatering, sometimes it is the extra fertilizing because you don't want to push lots of growth. And it is quite confusing about when we do our pruning of everything. So pruning is a really important thing. Most things need to be pruned after they drop their leaves, with the exception of birch and maple. So birch and maple get pruned not at all in the fall or the spring. They get done in the middle of summer. So in the month of July, first week of August is just fine. So that's, if you haven't, you have a birch or a maple and you need to do a little trimming, just leave it till next summer. They actually don't like to have a lot of pruning done anyway, so it's better not to do too much. Shrubs are the ones that are pretty more forgiving, and most of those we do prune when the leaves are off. If you prune lilacs in the fall time, you might prune where their flowers are going to come next year. So if you don't know about that, wait till they finish flowering and then you prune them after they've flowered. The spring flowering shrubs that will flower on their current growth, those are the ones that are easy to do. So roses, again the spireas, the potentillas, they look nice all trimmed up in the fall time. You can definitely do it. The whole month of October is a great time to do it. When you're doing your fall planting, some people go, oh, well, what else can I plant? And there's some perennials that can be done. You can divide perennials really well in the fall time. Just don't divide them into little tiny pieces. Make sure that they're fairly good sized roots that are going in there. They divide great because you remember, oh, that plant maybe got a little too big there and you just need to make it smaller. The other thing that people do get quite confused about is when to plant the bulbs that will flower in the spring. So our spring flowering bulbs are ones that get planted in the fall time. So September is a wonderful month into October to do tulips and daffodils, these new flowering onions. There's lots of different choices of those alliums they're called, and lots of little tiny rock garden kind of bulbs. And if you've never planted a bulb before, start with tulips. They're the easiest one, lots of choices and heights and colors, and you get good sized flowers. So they actually go in a bed where there's perennials, flowering in the springtime, or in the spring if you're going to plant some petunias later on or some marigolds or something like that. They're finished flowering, and then you can plant those plants on top and the bulb is underneath. So that's usually the biggest question we get about, well, when do I plant those? They see them flowering in the spring and go, so this is the time. Fall is for planting, and that fall bulb is just a great plant to have for flowering in the springtime. And then another thing that's really a good thing to do in the fall time is to start getting your soil ready for next spring, especially in the vegetable gardens, because they take a lot of nutrients. Our soil's very, very heavy and clay-like, so we want to keep adding things to it. Compost is still just wonderful. Peat moss isn't so bad, but I find if you do a mixture of compost and peat moss, you get some weight to it. And compost is even composted steer manure is fine. There's some great compost out there. We have one that's called sea soil that's just excellent because it's composted fish. So it makes the soil more acidic and it lightens it up. So that's an ongoing thing. And even the flower beds. If you have flower beds that are a little heavy, perennial beds, you can work compost in around the plant. Sometimes people will leave a 2-inch layer of compost on top of everything in the fall and then dig it in into the springtime. But in the vegetable garden, most of the times it is kind of worked in so that you've got something there, and then you work more in again in the springtime quite often too. Another thing that people are always wondering about is with their lawn, because we're watering lots, we had a lot of rain. Our lawns actually take a lot of nitrogen because that's what they feed. To make them green, they just use up nitrogen. You cut it off and they use up nitrogen. So in the fall time, you're giving them a low nitrogen, but a little bit higher phosphorus, and mostly some phosphorus and potash in there. So low nitrogen, because you don't want to push anything growing. And there's a few fall fertilizers out there, so some good choices. And that's something that you can do September, even as late as mid-October is fine. So it's a really good thing to do, because again, it helps that lawn get prepared for fall, but then it's nice for the spring already.